when he's in the room and we'll get started, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
He is here.
Perfect. All right, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 4:03. First line of business is approval of January minutes that were supposed to be amended. Lieutenant, I sent you an email a little while ago. Did we happen to get those completed? And because I never got a copy of them.
September 16th meeting?
No, July meeting. There was supposed to be an amendment in regards to the statistics. We had kind of emailed back and forth, I think, amongst the group with you in there. I don't know if you recall.
Yeah, I do, Vanessa, and if we didn't get that done, that's on me, not on the lieutenant. I didn't get it done.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put that on our next meeting as well.
Okay.
We can try to get that done so we can get those posted. I know we're behind, and so we need to make sure we keep ourselves caught up here. So September minutes, I did get those sent out to all of you a while ago. We do need to go ahead and get those approved so we can get those posted. Is there a motion for approval of September minutes?
I make a motion we approve the September written minutes.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Moving on to, I'm sorry?
Who was the second, Vanessa?
Elaine. Stephen. So we're going to go ahead and move to staff reports. I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Hongaria and Captain Pinkston.
Hey, everyone. I'll go ahead and read off the statistics for dog bites by district. These stats are also on the webpage. They were put there about, I think, 4 or 5 days ago for everybody to review. But dog bites by district, District 1 in September had 18, and in October had 12. District 2 had 5 in September and 2 in October. District 3 had 10 in September, 13 in October. District 4 had 4 in September and 3 in October. District 5 had 7 in September and 2 in October. And District 6 had 8 in September and 4 in October. Did you guys also want the attacks and everything else?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, so the number of dog attacks by district. District
Sure.
1 in September, there was 4. In October, there was 10. In District 2, there was 2 in September and 3 in October. In District 3, there was 5 in September and 3 in October. In District 4, there was 2 in September and 9 in October. And District 5, there was 5 in September and 2 in October. And in District 6, there was 9 in September and 8 in October. Now we'll move on to the potentially dangerous dogs by district. District 1 in September had 6, in October had 0. District 2 had 2 in September and 0 in October. District 3 had 3 in September and 4 in October. District 4 had 1 in September and 7 in October. And let's see, 5 had 0 in September, 1 in October. And District 6 had 1 in September and 0 in October. Then our deemed dangerous by district, and that'd be dogs are deemed levels 1, 2, or 3. District 1 had 1 in September, 1 in October. District 2 had 0 for both September and October. District 3 had 1 for September and 1 for October. District 4 had 1 in September and 0 in October. 5 had 1 in September, 0 in October. And District 6 had 1 in September and 3 in October.
Are there any questions from the board?
I wanted to know, do we know how many of these incidents were reported by mail carriers or delivery workers?
I don't have the statistics broken down by that. We just have just the incidents in general. We can I can try and track down. We'd have to go by if they reported it by their by work or occupation.
Yes,
So-
I'd just be curious about that number. I know that one of the rhyme and reasons for me even getting on this board is in my neighborhood. I live over in the Kenmar area, and I know that that had been, of course, a concern by those postal carriers, and it resulted in everybody, and for many blocks, actually having to install curbside mailboxes. And so there was, of course, the issue in which it was reported that there were so many of these incidents that, of course, resulted in them feeling unsafe, and then, of course, just needing to be able to have the convenience of passing out mail from their vehicles instead of by foot. So I'm just curious if there's any way that we would be able to get that data.
We can look at trying to get that, but I think Kenmar is in District 1 area, and I'm just looking at how those are.
Yes, it's
Just the-
District 1.
Yeah, but just looking at the incidents of having 18 in September and October for District 1, and just attacks 4 and 10. I don't know if that's all going to be. I think it's going to be a small percentage. It's going to be postal workers, but we'll look, and we can get that. We'll get that information for the next meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions for Lieutenant? No? Thank you, Lieutenant, for your report.
You're welcome.
So in new business, we are going to discuss election nominations. The current positions that are open, of course, is the chair and co-chair. Terms are 2 years apiece. And I believe the bylaws state that we can only do 2 consecutive terms at a time. So I just wanted to open the floor for nominations first for chair. If anybody has any nominations.
I would nominate Vanessa.
Well, I'm termed out as of this year. So it's going to have to be
Oh.
somebody. Yeah. But thank you. COVID kind of robbed part of this year, but that's okay.
Yeah.
All about adapting. So, yeah. I personally want to nominate Stephanie as chair. She's done a great job before. Is there any other nominations? No?
I would second your nomination of Stephanie.
Okay. Great. Okay. Any other nominations for this position? No? Okay, so I want to go ahead and open the floor up for nominations for co-chair.
I'd
Well, since-
nominate Richard.
Okay. Okay. Any other nominations?
Vanessa, I'd like to nominate you. You've done an incredible job, even during COVID, of having to switch things back and forth, and try to make amends meet for everybody. And so I'd like to nominate you for co-chair, please.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, I'll accept that. Richard, do you accept your nomination?
I would second your nomination.
Aw, okay. Do you accept your nomination?
I wouldn't be able to. Yeah,
Okay.
just because of my schedule is insane as it is.
All right. Are there any other nominations? No? Okay, so we can either A, vote on this at the beginning of next meeting, or vote on this and have it become effective for our next meeting. What would you guys prefer?
Oh,
Just go ahead and vote?
Yeah, I'd say vote too. So it's effective in January, right? For the January meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we'll vote by raising hand. All in favor of Stephanie McCurdy as chair for our next 2 years, raise your hand, please.
Do I raise my hand?
Yes, you can
Do I
raise your
vote for myself? I don't know.
Sure, why not? Okay. So that motion does pass, or that does pass. Nominate for co-chair would be myself, Vanessa. All of those voting for that, raise your hand, please. Okay. Let's see. I didn't catch all the hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. Okay. All righty. So, Stephanie, starting in January, it's all yours, sister.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And of course, I'm always here. So the next thing is special committee reports. And Mrs. Stephen, do you have an update for us from your committee?
Well, due to just everything, I have been slower to follow up on things than is good. I did check with our city attorney, and she says that the subcommittee meetings are subject to the Kansas Open Meetings Act.
Oh, okay.
So that I had proposed 2 dates for, to choose one for our next meeting. But, and those were both Sunday evenings. I'm not sure if that's going to work because now we'll need to talk to the city and see what works for them. So we just learned that. So the other thing was we had met because I, did not understand that. And we had talked about kind of how to go about public education on pet ownership and having animals. And we had talked about targeted digital marketing, focusing on 3 areas. One being, are you ready for a pet? Second being overpopulation and population control. And the third being pet identification. So those will be kind of the 3 general areas. And then we can use different forms of getting the word out, whether that be working with the city to use their social media accounts, or because there's district pages, the city page. We can also use some printed material, but there's all sorts of different ideas for ways we can get that information out. So we'll need to start the conversation again and talk with the city on how works best for them to do that, especially since they're going to have to figure out how to make it work online in the current environment.
Okay. Is there any questions for her to address for us? I kind of wonder, would it be, I'm curious, Mrs. Hardwell had brought up, the mail carriers. I wonder if is there any way you think that maybe we could throw in something in there to bring the awareness, to help protect milk carriers somehow? I mean, it all kind of ties into the responsible pet ownership. Just an idea. I mean, kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone here,
That would definitely go in with the "Are you ready for a pet?"
Mm-hmm.
Because part of having a pet is being able to ensure the safety of that pet and other people around that pet. And so like, for instance, that's one reason my cats don't get to be unsupervised, around young kids. That's just part of pet ownership. So that would certainly go in with that.
Yeah, I just think it's important because, that has been brought up from other members in the community multiple times. I know George has been great about bringing the awareness to the mail carriers at the various districts. So I just kind of thought maybe we could incorporate that in there, kind of.
That's a great idea. And that could also be part of how it's targeted, since marketing, but you can target messages so narrowly right now that we could actually target, if we know that a certain district tends to have a higher number of attacks on mail carriers, we can target digital marketing towards that district. And I don't know that because of the changes in city revenue due to the pandemic, that there will be much money or any money for things like flyers or anything like that. I know that Emily with KHS was interested in looking at grants. And one of the things that she had brought up was doing a survey of the various rescues in town, because the rescues kind of interface more with people who are both adopting and surrendering animals. And so they may see openings for public education that some of us who are not involved with rescues don't. And so the mail carrier type of thing would definitely be one thing a question to include on the survey. Anyway.
I think the targeted areas we could correlate that with, Lieutenant's reports, because he breaks it down by the districts, which is really important. And maybe heavily target the districts that have the increase in like attacks. It looks like District 6 had quite a bit in September. 1 had quite a bit as well in October. So it might be a way to, target those areas. Just some ideas.
I was like, Tiwana had a question.
I've had my hand raised, but I guess it didn't work.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see your hand raised. I apologize.
Just sharing in general, I believe 2 to 3 years ago, we did, in combination with the post office, actually send and flyer out with the water bills. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Yes, that's correct. And it also went in a snail mail mailer from the post office directly about the dog bite stuff.
So who funded that when they did that? Was it the city?
Postmaster.
Okay.
That was like our very first thing out of the gate. We had a big press conference with the postmaster about the dog bites because they were on the uptick, and they sent out a mailer. It was a really good mailer. I've got it somewhere in my house still, in one of my notebooks here that I can dig out. But it was a really good mailer, and it really got to the point. It talked about what happens when they go to the shelter, and then the stuff specifically about the dog bites and what the offenses were. And that was when we instituted the fine and the, depending on what level it was, whether or not you had to have concrete enclosure, whether or not you had to have a sign, then you had to pay for the signs. It talked about all those things as well. And the postmaster was happy to do that because it helped his people stay safe.
So do you think there was a decrease, quite a bit of a decrease after sending all those mailers out? Like it was very effective.
It appeared to decrease. I don't know if it was just the time of the year we sent it out. Like I believe it was in January. It was bitter cold, and we did the press conference outside. I do remember that. So it was in those winter months where animals, a lot of them were probably more inside, and so we did see a decrease in that. A lot of times it's education. These people don't know that the animals are out. They've gone to work, their animals in their backyard, they got home, their animals gone. So I think another round of that and getting in touch with the postmaster would definitely behoove us to do so. Obviously, we've had some changes as well in the ordinance, and so we can add those things in there as well.
Okay. Well, I think maybe that could be something that we could get in the works. If it's something they've already done, then they probably have a template already somewhere on file, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know that the printing was donated by someone who actually just came to our meeting randomly and donated the printing. So I'm sure we can hunt that person down again or find another person to donate that printing.
Okay. Hmm.
And Tuana's had her hand up.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in because, of course, I think that the educational pieces are of course important. But I even want to take it a step further because, you know, as we see these stray dogs in the community, and it's something that I know that in my area we deal with quite a bit. You know, many of these are like big dogs, and you'll, especially in the summer, you see a lot of them, and you don't know if they're just getting loose from a neighbor's or if they're legitimate strays to where someone has let them off of the leash and determined that they no longer want them. But I would be very curious to be able to have, and I don't know what already exists, so please forgive me for lack of knowledge about this, but I think that there needs to be a more meaningful way of going about reporting that, especially when you continue to see them clustered in one area. And so when I received I was super offended when I received it in the mail, but I received a letter in the mail that I'm sure that everyone received actually. But at first I thought that, I'm like, it's not my dog, but it was some kind of literature that mentioned that, hey, we continue to see dogs in the area. If we continue to see this, you'll be asked to put your, to pick up your mail from a post office or to install a curbside mailbox. And there was nothing that I could have done about that situation. Now, of course, I ended up having to, mail was stopped. And so I did have to install one curbside. But I was even thinking about, like, we could have better advocated for these postal carriers, for these mail carriers, if we had actually been able to report it, so whether they're deemed as a nuisance or anything like that initially, but if we had been able to, to call and have these dogs picked up or something like that in a efficient, quick way, then maybe it wouldn't have gotten to a point to where we eventually received information that a postal carrier had actually been bitten. And so again, I mean, postal carriers, they're vulnerable because they are on foot. Many of us hop into our cars in our driveways and we're up out of the community. So even though we see these stray animals, they're not as big a nuisance because we're not necessarily walking these blocks. So I have no clue who might have that information about the way that you go about reporting. Can you only, do they only, is it only urgent if that dog has bitten someone, or if it's a big, like, I have no clue about like what that process is.
I can answer that. So if there's an animal running loose in the city of Wichita, the person is, a lot of times they either call 911 and that gets dispatched over to Wichita Animal Services, or if they've just called direct into Wichita Animal Services, it goes straight into dispatch. So either way, they go into dispatch, one way or the other. So if the animal has bitten somebody and the person has called 911, not only does Wichita Animal Services show, that call goes into the queue for Wichita Police Department to make a visit to that residence as well, especially if there's somebody hurt, and then that 911 caller would be the one that's telling them whether someone is bit, injured, if they need medical assistance, or who they need on scene. And so then that's how that rolls out of the system. I will tell you, I've been that person that has called 911 and got into, they told me that an officer was on the way, and I hung up and turned around and called Wichita Services, and they already had somebody on the way to me. So this is not an isolated incident with just particular areas in District 1. I was not in District 1 when I made that phone call. This is in a lot of places. I will tell you, we have absolutely stepped up our game in the last, most likely 3 years since we did this mailer to begin with. Because we've hired more people, we have more people on the street, and they're able to make it to those calls more in a timely manner. So that has been very helpful. So I know it may be frustrating to look at those bite calls or attack calls or things like that, but I can assure you that those are being addressed on a one-on-one basis at some point, whether or not they're picking up the animal and taking it to the shelter, or the people have come back and have picked up their dog at the scene. Oh my gosh, my dog got out, whatever the case may be. And then if it did bite somebody, then it goes through the dangerous dog process. So if it would, that's up to the lieutenant and the captain to deem those animals as they see fit. And then the cycle kind of starts all over again.
You have actually refreshed my memory now, Stephanie, because I think that when this happened to me last year, where there was a dog that looked a little aggressive, I think that I actually called because we also had a trash issue in the same community, and I didn't know who to call, but I believe that I might have called the guy who rides around in his truck. So I called him, and he's like, call 911. And I'm like, I'm not calling 911 on a dog. I just thought that was crazy because I did not know that that was the process. So maybe, when we talk about the education piece of that, we do let people know that that is a part of the process, because to me, it sounded like absurd to call 911 because I felt it was a non-emergency. So it was kind of crazy to be told to call 911 when the dog had not bitten anyone yet.
It's just that we tell people that because it's our first line of defense. That way that dispatcher can make that call. That's what they're trained to do. And they can get that call into the right hands, whether it be the Wichita Police Department, whether it be Wichita Animal Services, or if the animal has, barked at somebody and walked back home. There is also, just for everyone's knowledge, a non-emergent number that you can call to get services as well. I would have to look that number up for you, but there is a non-emergent number too, because there's a lot of people that feel like they don't want to call 911 when they see an animal that's loose and things like that. Now, I'm probably the dummy that I see an animal loose and I jump out of my car, I grab my leash and my treats, and we're going to try to go coax it in somewhere. So that animal's safe and that human life is safe as well.
Thank
Miss
you.
Teresa, you had your, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, Miss Teresa, you had your hand up.
Yes, one of the things that they have to look at is when she's talking about stray, like the dogs are loose every single day, and 911 isn't really the appropriate one to call on that one. I think they only want call if it's like a bite or an action to call 911. The other thing is, I know when we did our studies back in the beginning, it took so long because stray dog calls were so low on the totem pole that it took so long that they almost didn't even bother to go look for strays because they would be totally gone by the time that animal control arrived.
Richard, I saw that you posted the phone number. What was that again? I'm sorry.
That's Wichita Animal Services, extension 1. That goes directly into dispatch.
Yeah, I think the pickups, I think maybe it varies. I mean, it depends on load. If the officers are very busy with other priorities, then we won't see a pickup. And oftentimes when they do show up, the dog's no longer there. So it's not very fruitful. In the neighborhoods that I see, people tend to pick them up, like neighbors tend to pick them up. But one of the things that I see happening is, one, there's this idea that if they take the dog to the shelter, it will be euthanized. I mean, some people are just convinced that our shelter is a death mill, and it's just not so. A lot of people are taking them to vets now to have the chips scanned. And then the other thing that I've seen happen is people will talk about rehoming or keeping the dog if they don't find it a home within a certain period of time, which I believe is not legal. There was a situation in my neighborhood where a woman who was very protective of her dog, it managed to get out. Its name was Baby, and it was a little Shih Tzu. And it had gotten out and wandered over to a yard sale, and a lady had picked it up thinking it was a stray, took it home, gave it to her mother. And for a couple of weeks at least, this woman was frantic every day, posting pictures. Where's Baby? Help me find Baby. And eventually, by some fluke, she got the dog back. But I think there's this idea that people can just keep strays without having it go through the shelter system. So that might be another area, Elaine, for our education.
And maybe if we're going to be sending out something to everybody, maybe the headline should read, "What should I do?" And then we give a couple of different scenarios of, if I see an animal that's bit, if I see a stray animal, blah, 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 and maybe outline it for people that way that they know. It is against state law to keep an animal, to harbor an animal that has not been through the shelter system. So I can't tell you how many messages that we get as a rescue where people call and say, hey, I have this animal, can you take it? I'm sorry, we can't take it. You have to take it to the shelter. We tell people that is their first line of defense. It has to do its 3-day stray hold before anything else can happen. And a lot of people, like Richard said, want to circumvent that system. And we've had it happen where we've had to tell people that, and they're like, no, we don't want to take it to the shelter because they're going to euthanize it. I mean, our euthanasia rates are so low here at our shelter because of our rescue community. That's something that we need to be proud of and make sure that we're telling the general public that as well.
Absolutely. And I had a discussion earlier with Sergeant Hungria about how we might be able to get that message out in forms of either monthly reports for that could be given to the CSR to be read at the DABs or to be sent out in their publications. Just some information about general statistics that would be targeted for the district that they're going to. And perhaps if, I don't know how much time and energy they want to put into it, but you know, a neighborhood association might be interested in this particular zip code and to see how that maybe has changed. But also to talk about their successes and to show, you know, here's what our bites are for the last month, and here's how that looks over the course of the year. The trend is going down or the trend is going up. So that should be forthcoming at some point.
Question.
And the
Rich.
people
Sorry.
also need to be aware that they can put a hold on an animal when they bring it into the shelter.
Very good. Richard, I had a question for you. You had mentioned going by zip code. Is there a particular reason zip code is more effective than district?
Well, zip code is within a district, right? There's multiple zip codes. So maybe 67218, there's more stray dogs being picked up there or being brought into the shelter from there than another part of District 3, like SOSI.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're wanting more of a defined report based off of the location within the district. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
they're collecting that information already. So it would be nice to be able to have that option for, you know, at a district advisory board meeting or for the neighborhood associations, which are more zip code specific.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. I think it's a great idea, but I guess we'll just have to see if it's going to create a bigger workload for the lieutenant and captain and what works better for their system. So it'd be interesting to see where, you know, how that turns out. But
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that, you know, one of the things I offered was to just have a data dump once a month, and that I could split it up and send it to the neighborhood associations for their to be read at their meetings. So
Gotcha.
That's an option too.
Cool. Okay. Lieutenant, you have anything to add to this conversation or any? I know there was, you know, some talk about how to call and all that good stuff. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
As far as the calling, call the 350-3360 to report all that stuff. Don't call 911 because of the they're just going to transfer you to that phone number anyway, so that way you don't get frustrated with being on hold and being on hold. After hours, even when you call that number, it'll give, there's a series of prompts that'll let you know what to do. And then if it's one of those calls that we need to get out on, we'll if it's a priority enough call, we'll be out on it even on after hours. So, and there is an after hours. It should allow for an emergency. It should allow for it to roll over to City Hall security, and then they'll be able to contact us. So, we'll just have to see. I know I mentioned this yesterday to Richard. We'll have to see what how the information is taken in on our records management system to see if we can break it down into zip codes, if that's a possibility or not. There's only so much, just the limitations of the program, but we will do some research into that and hopefully have an answer for the next meeting in January.
Wonderful. All right. Anything else anybody needs to bring up on this subject?
I just, there was a little bit of conflicting information about who to call. We had an individual in our neighborhood who was being awakened, his wife during the day and he at night, and their infant child all the time by a dog that was next door barking. and it went on for over a year. As far as I know, it's still going on. And I raised hell about it and was told to have him call 911 every time it happened. And so maybe, and that was told me by the chief. So there may be times when it's appropriate and not appropriate. I don't know.
Richard, from my understanding, that situation was a little bit unique because they had opened a case on that person for a noise complaint, and that they were asking that individual to call 911 so they could document that. There was probably a better course of action. I think this, the lieutenant could probably speak to that, but we did tell people in the beginning whenever they were asking about who to call, especially if it was a dog bite, to make sure that they did call 911 so resources could be available to those who are affected in that time.
Okay.
Let me talk to that.
The cabinet is going to visit on or talk on that.
All right.
We're gonna see him.
Oh my gosh, there he is.
Hi, everyone.
I put on my chair.
I want to remind everybody that approximately a year ago, I worked out an agreement with George, who he refers to it as his gold standard. But
Right.
we have the problematic cases that can't be resolved. Those are brought to me specifically, and we work to resolve those. I'm familiar with what Richard's talking about. Stephanie is correct that, you know, we prefer you to call the non-emergent number, but if you don't remember it, 911 is okay, because the dispatchers will in fact route the call to where it needs to go. So if you don't remember the non-emergent number, you can call 911. But if it gets to the point where it's problematic and it's not resolved, those should be brought to me. Thank you.
Hey, before you run away, what is the status on this gold standard? I mean, you guys have been working on it.
We've had about 3 or 4 of them so far. I think we've been able to get all of them resolved.
Okay.
I've not had any update on this call that Richard's talking about in probably at least a month and a half. So I apologize. I probably should have looked into that before the meeting, so I'd have an answer if it were to have come up, and I didn't do that.
That's okay. It's all right.
Okay.
Just curious how that was going. I know George had presented it a couple meetings ago. So yeah, just kind of curious.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else to be added? No? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and continue to old business. And
Are you gonna,
Teresa, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, Patrick.
are you gonna ask for any new business items?
Well, I asked for new business items during when I sent out the agenda and didn't get anything in return. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do.
Sure.
In consideration that 4 of the 6 district advisory boards in the city voted down TNR.
Mhm.
It's my understanding one other district either tabled it, and I'm not sure what happened in the 6th district. But in light of that, I've always been a little confused. It's obvious and apparent that TNR is ongoing in the city. It's been ongoing in the city for a long time. It's also obvious and apparent that a lot of people in the city don't want it. They don't want it in their neighborhood. They don't want it around their homes. And it's obvious and apparent that it's against the city ordinance. So I have a question, and then I'd like to make a motion. But my question is, if it is against city ordinance, why is the city, specifically animal control, allowing it? And don't you think this board, you know, being at its job and objective is to make recommendations to the Animal Control Division of the Wichita Police Department on what should happen? I mean, we're in conflict here.
Okay. So who wants to go first? Captain, you want to go first?
Sure, let me go first.
Perfect.
I'm not sure I understand what he means by TNR is illegal in the city. I guess he'd have to explain that, what he's talking about in that regard, if he could do that, please.
I didn't have time before the meeting to look up the specific ordinance, but in my prior reading of it, You know, if you are feeding and providing care for these cats, you're the owner. So it's in conflict with, you know, what is expected of an owner, a caretaker of these cats. Is it not?
Okay, are you saying that these caretakers can't TNR the cats that they're taking care of? Because I still do not understand what you're
I don't
asking.
believe they can. I'm asking you. We can pull the ordinance and
What-
discuss it, but
Yeah, why don't you do that? Because I think that they can. I'm not understanding your question. I think that they can do that.
Well, I think he may be referring to the you feed it, you own it, and you're not allowed to own or feed more than, what is it, 2 or 3 without a special permit.
So,
Saying that
so how does TNR come into play in that? I'm still not
because
understanding.
they're feeding it.
Okay, so,
The law says if you feed it, you own it.
so where is the TNR component of that? You're
The
talking
TNR
about feeding a
component
cat.
is there are citizens who are feeding multiple cats, and therefore they own them, and they are doing so without the right permits.
That has nothing to do with TNR. TNR stands for trap. Neuter,
Believe me,
return.
I know what that TNR stands for, but that's why we need an ordinance, is to get around that law. That's the whole reason.
So the reason why the ordinance failed previously, there was lots of things. The original ordinance, they wanted to put in microchipping. They wanted to put in a bunch of mandatory restrictions into things. I just never could really get it off the ground. And then it got prematurely sent out to all the district advisory boards before everything was, I think, 100% ironed out. I don't think TNR is a dead issue within the city. It's something that needs fine tuning. And I think having new membership on the board will be a really good asset to maybe get something differently done. That's just kind of my thought process on it anyways. Stephanie, do you have anything?
So I was the chair at the time that TNR was brought to the board, and I was the one that was the sacrificial lamb and sent out to the district advisory boards to present this potential ordinance change for TNR. And as we all know and sit here, that obviously did not go well, as we were ill prepared in what the ordinance structure was and how it really truly needed to happen. And so I think that, like what Vanessa said, with new opportunity-based individuals on this board who can critically think through a potential ordinance change, I think that that's something that we can come to grips with in the future and produce something that will not just work for people who wish to complete TNR, but also who desire to keep their community cat population to a minimum. And I do think that there is a happy medium. We have to be able to seek that out with information and find that.
well,
Ellen?
thank you, Richard. That's exactly what I was referring to answer the captain's question, but I disagree, Stephanie. It's my impression that the majority of citizens don't want TNR. That's why the ordinance didn't pass. I don't think it had anything to do with not having the appropriate information, education, or knowledge of changing the ordinance. So,
If I could
and it's
add,
my belief that that's why the majority voted it down. You know, I've talked to, I don't know, between 20 and 30 people regarding this issue. 70% don't want a cat colony anywhere near their home. Some of you live in areas where the HOA would restrict it and prohibit it to begin with. So in that regard, I'm going to make a motion that this board vote that the practice of TNR and a written recommendation be made to the animal control that it not be continued.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is that TNR does not continue, correct, Patrick?
Not with the blessing or the money or the support of the city.
Okay. So motion is on the floor. Is there a second before we go into discussion?
I would second it for the sake of discussion.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. I'm opening the floor to discussion. I do know that Elaine had her hand up patiently.
Thank you. One of the reasons that the TNR failed with the majority of districts, it passed in District 5, which I represent. One of the reasons that it was not better received by other districts is because it was focused exclusively on unowned cats. And that's one reason why in the last meeting or two, we've also been talking about how do we address the owned cat population, because it's going to take some compromise and some addressing both sides of the issue to make a long-lasting difference. But it will take both sides of the issue. If we don't have TNR, then the feral cat population is going to continue to multiply. If we don't address the owned cat population, the feral cat population is going to continue to multiply. It's going to take both. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion from the board?
Vanessa, I have a question when the board is done discussing it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Teresa?
I agree a lot with what Elaine said, and that we need to turn off the faucet. And if we keep the faucet running, then that's going to perpetuate the issue. I also agree with the homeowners. Things COVID and being behind on spays and neuters, we live very close to a mobile home park, and shockingly, people are finding litters and litters and litters of kittens that nobody wants. And there's plenty of old rundown mobile homes in this area that aren't inhabited, that were and brush piles that create perfect environments for those cats to reproduce uncontrolled, with no one caring for their health and no one providing them any care, not to mention rabies and other zoonotic diseases.
I have a question for Patrick. Patrick, whenever you mentioned in your motion that the TNR to not be supported by the blessing of the city or with money, are you aware of money that the city is putting forth for any TNR programs?
No, I haven't reviewed that budget, but it's obvious that the work with organizations such as Friends of Feral Felines and others is supported by the city.
And what do you mean? Can you clarify what you mean by support?
Well, in one aspect, you know, they're not prohibiting in any way TNR. And in my opinion, and obviously this is going to have to go to the city legal folks, I still think it's against the ordinance to care for, feed, host, be whatever you want to call it, a cat colony that has been trapped, neutered, and returned.
Okay. And one more question. Are you
Secondly,
aware of a specific instance where Wichita Animal Services were called and services from the city were not rendered on behalf of the city individual who made the complaint against a TNR colony?
Am I aware of any of those instances?
Mm-hmm.
I am not.
Okay. I'm just checking. Thank you.
So it's my understanding the city does not fund Friends of Feral Felines. Those are based off of donations. Just to clarify that. Captain, I'm sorry, Richard, go ahead.
That is true. I think what it sounds like, Patrick, is that by supporting it, it's sort of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, a tacit agreement that they're not going to step in and arrest anyone for doing that. There was the situation where one resident was having a problem with cats, and the police department referred them to Friends of Feral, who in turn refused to help because it was kitten season. And so there was nothing done about that for that individual. I've spoken with individuals who have called Friends of Feral and asked for some help, and they said that if you don't want to keep the cats, then we can't help you, or it's going to cost you $60 to $70 to have those cats fixed, and these people just don't have that money. So there's a need, but there's no services being provided currently because it's expensive to house the cats and to euthanize the cats. It's a big expense. And, you know, ideally that would not be the first order of operations for a community when it comes to companion animals.
So Richard,
Stephanie,
what I hear you're saying is that you see the value in someone stepping in whenever a call does come to Wichita Animal Services to render services to help those individuals. Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to understand because so I don't get a conflicting message.
Well, what I'm saying is that there are instances where individuals have called and, you know, just have not received services from the city around that. Now, there should be something, but I would say that, I mean, I'm not a big fan of euthanasia. I think it has its place. But, you know, in line with Elaine, I think that's not a place that people want to get into because it's just, you become a killing machine. If people can't be responsible with cats and get them spayed and neutered, then we just become killing machines. And it's
tragic.
Teresa. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you done, Richard?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Teresa, you've had your hand up.
Oh, I was just gonna, a quick part of that is there's no leash law on cats. So if an officer sees a cat wandering around, there's nothing they can do. So unless there is a nuisance complaint, the city of Wichita's hands are tied. So unless someone calls and complains about an issue, there's no leash law. So they have no reason to go and address that, except like I know they've done that door-to-door stuff when there's been like a rabid skunk or something in the area to make sure animals are vaccinated for rabies.
So Patrick, what would you suggest the action be? I mean, if you don't agree with TNR, then what would be your contribution to help solve the issue?
Well, I've done a fair amount of research on my own. I have my own life experiences, just like all of you do. You know, I've been through years ago the situation where a neighbor's feeding, I would count off and on 3-4 times a week in the evenings, 11 to 17 cats. I know all the problems that I experienced with that and how long it took to solve the issue. Like I said, I've talked to many people who don't want to have to go through that. You know, I don't have the issue to solve the cat problem. I can tell you from my own research, you know, Canada, there's a lot more studies out there done by biologists, you know, than the other, as opposed to the one study on the East Coast where they said TNR was a success in a small area over a 20+ year study. You know, Canada has named cats the apex predator. You talk to wildlife biologists who work in the city and the rural areas in the United States who have looked at this, the majority of them will tell you cats are a predatory problem. You know, if you've been paying any attention, the United States, North America, and parts of South America and Central America are experiencing the lowest bird populations in 50 years. They don't know why. They don't have all the answers. I'm not blaming cats. But, you know, every time it's brought up, you know, I have these ladies, men and women telling me, well, you know, cats are really good for keeping vermin population control down. Yeah, I know. I spent some time on a farm. I can see how effective they are in taking care of mice and some other vermin. But at the same time, these same people don't want to talk about how effective a predator they are of birds and other wildlife that we all want in the city. Cats are not a natural predator. They were introduced by us a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think TNR is the solution.
So
I don't think it's okay, you know, for the issue to be ignored when the majority of the citizens voted it down in their districts. I think it's something we ought to take a hard look at and make a decision on. And, that's what we're here for. We're here to make these types of recommendations. I never thought it would be an easy solution.
I have one more question for Captain Pinkston. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, and that when a call comes in about a potential TNR situation or a colony of some sort, it was mentioned earlier that we're not arresting, no one has been arrested. I want to make sure that the public doesn't think that Wichita Animal Services is just going to go out on site and arrest somebody, and that we're going to try to work with those people to make sure that we get them into compliance per the standard. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, first off, that is correct. I want to make sure everybody understands there's a difference between TNR and cat colonies. They're not one and the same.
Right.
TNR references cat colonies, but they are not one and the same. Second thing I want to make sure everybody understands is the city of Wichita in no way, shape, or form conducts TNR. It does not happen with us. There are private entities out there that participate in that. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Please let me finish talking. When it gets to the point where citizens call in and say, we have a nuisance with cats in our neighborhood, we try to solve that problem. Okay, when police departments walk in and start slapping handcuffs on people, our citizens don't like that. Okay, I understand the argument that people say cats are predatory, they're harmful to the birds. I understand it. I understand people saying cats that live next door to me are nuisances. I understand that as well. All right, but TNR is not the same thing as cat colonies. The city of Wichita does not participate in TNR.
I don't know how anyone would think a misdemeanor crime of feeding too many cats or something along those lines would even warrant an arrest. I'm not even sure why that's part of the discussion.
Because somebody mentioned it earlier about arresting someone, and I want to make sure that people know that we're not out arresting people because they have too many cats.
Well, okay.
Ellen?
So yes, we do have a problem with cat overpopulation. It negatively affects residents in the city of Wichita. It also negatively affects those generations of cats that are then breeding and then suffer because they're just left out in the wild. It also negatively affects wildlife. And that's why, to deal with cat overpopulation, which is an issue not only in this continent, but several others, is going to take a multifaceted approach. And that's why we don't want to eliminate any options. Instead, because we went up against the obstacles we did with things not being prepared and some of that stuff, that's why we want to start afresh and look at how can we take not just a singular tool to approach this, but a multifaceted, holistic approach to deal with both owned and unowned cats in the community. And when we do that over time, that is going to be the only way that we can reduce the number of feral cats in the community.
Vanessa, I'd like to make a motion, a secondary motion, that we table this discussion because we clearly don't have a lot of information to go on. It wasn't brought up ahead of time. And so I think that our members need the opportunity to do their own research and due diligence to bring forth a valued and educational discussion moving forward.
Okay, so
Mike
amended
has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Patrick, what's that?
Mike's had his hand up.
Okay.
I just had a hypothetical question, and that was if we had packs of stray dogs on the street, would we be okay with people just neutering them and putting them back out? Would that be the good solution, or would we have some problem with that? And that's just a hypothetical to think about as we go forward. I don't don't really need an answer from anybody.
Okay.
Excellent point.
So the amended motion right now presented by Stephanie was to table this till our next meeting so we can adequately prepare. Is there a second to this amended motion? Teresa,
I'd
you
second that.
okay. All in favor, vote by raising your hand. So there's 1, 2. All opposed? Okay, so motion passes. We will have this tabled until our next meeting to give everybody the proper amount of time to do research, to be able to contribute to this conversation. Thank you, Patrick, for bringing this up. And this is something I think that I'm hopeful with the new board, we can have a great, healthy discussion in order to get something kind of resolution. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda, hold on, I lost my notes here. Teresa, turning this over to you for an update in regards to the breeding ordinance amendment that you were working on.
Well, if you read the email that I sent to you, I stated that due to family issues, because apparently I'm taking high school now with remote as well.
Okay.
Not able to research, and it also seemed like was not something that the city in general had any interest in, as far as allowing reproductive females to be in a house together. So
Okay. So is this something that you want to table
that.
for now, or Teresa?
It seems silly to waste our time with it. So
Okay. All right. So we will go ahead and take that off there then. Okay. So at this point, since there's no other old business, we'll go ahead and open the floor. If you could raise your hand if you have an update on any activities or concerns in your neighborhoods, so we could go ahead and get those addressed. Nothing? Nope. Okay. All right. So since we have nothing and we can't do public comment since we're on a Zoom meeting, is there a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. All in favor? Raise your hand. Perfect. Okay. So our next meeting will be January 20th, 4 o'clock. It is tentatively scheduled for the Kansas Humane Society. Of course, that is pending, depending on what's going on with COVID. So it may end up being another Zoom meeting. I'm not for certain, but we'll make sure that we get you the information out. And in the future, if there's anything new business wise, please email Stephanie McCurdy with that information so we can make sure that we get that put on the agenda. Thank you guys very much for a great meeting. I think we have stuff that we can work on, and I'm excited about that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be chair. Last few years, I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing what we're going to do next year. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.